Hi, everybody. Welcome to Accessibility Now, a podcast about disability rights in Georgia, presented by the statewide Independent Living Council of Georgia. And I'm really excited to have our guest today, Parker Glick, who worked with the statewide Independent Living Council in the past. So we're going to hear all about what Parker's been up to and talk about advocacy in general. So, Parker, welcome.
Hey, y'all. Thank you very much for having me, Matt.
Can you share with us about your path to advocacy work? What got you into this field?
Yeah, so when I was about 17 or 18, I gotten involved with what was called a youth advisory council down in Florida. And that's really what kind of launched me into the independent living world. It exposed me to, how can a young person with a disability be engaged in their communities, and finding their voice. And I didn't even know I had a voice, right? Like a lot of young folks with disabilities. So at that time I had participated in that program with my mom. And so if you can imagine, it'd be a little hard for a young person to kind of grow into their own kind of thing. So I was lucky enough to continue on with that youth advisory council, which then introduced me to the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, April, and the National Council on Independent Living. Um, and as you may already know, it's a huge network. And so that brought in so much more, opened up so much more for me, um, to then get me started in, working at centers for independent living. Um, and that got me to be like a young person getting involved with my community. From there, I went into employment to start in Daytona Beach as an education case manager. And I was tasked with, supporting students with their IEP and 504 plan needs and getting those taken care of in the school system. Then from there, I moved to the state of Georgia and started working for the center there, and did more youth work, more a little bit more social media based work, and continued to be involved with April and Nickel, and continue to grow my, I guess, network, but also like list of friends and peers and mentors too. I had the privilege of being able to meet folks like Judy Human, Nicole, and April. And so, that got me involved, and it opened also opportunities for me to try like public speaking or to do like presentations and such on behalf of the entities that I worked for. Um, and so doing presentations at those larger conferences of Nickel and April. And then today, I work as a program coordinator for another youth related organization out of North Carolina.
Oh, great. Is it also like a advocacy organization
So
or no?
so the program coordinating part of it is strictly to get the youth leadership forum planned and going every year. We do have advocacy opportunities, but we do try to provide more mentorship to the young folks and allowing the floor for them to provide their advocacy efforts.
Oh, very cool. Um, so kind of like providing the context or circumstances for them to speak up and let their own voice be heard.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool because that's kind of how you shared about your journey beginning. Like you said you didn't know you had a voice.
Exactly.
Um, so now you get to provide that for others. That's awesome.
Yeah, kind of full circle moment there.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, and where are you based now?
Rochester,
North
New
Ca-
York.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Gotcha.
get around.
Yeah, you're busy. Um, so you mentioned Georgia in there specifically.
Yes.
Um, what brought you to SILCGA?
So SILCG It was the second position was able or had the opportunity to hold in out of Georgia after working for the Center for Independent Living. And um,
Which SIL, by the way?
the Atlanta SIL Disability Link.
Oh, right, right. Okay.
It was being connected with SILC was an opportunity for me to kind of understand more of how independent living is impacted through policy. Because as you may already know, the centers do more of the one-on-one consumer-driven work, and the SILCs will do more of the kind of policy-driven behind the scenes, bigger picture with the centers kind of stuff. And so yeah, that's kind of how it came about. It was, one right after the other.
I gotcha. And so would you say the work that you do now with youth is more kind of in the direct service, consumer driven
Yes.
line?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
more connected or more aligned to the way centers operate versus the way silks operate.
I gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of two different aspects of the independent living movement. So it's great that you've gotten the experience of both.
Yeah, and
Um,
when I was living in Georgia, I also, had the privilege of being able to work with the PNA, the Protection and Advocacy Agency, Georgia Advocacy Office, and that's another perspective into independent living that they provide. And so Georgia, the state of Georgia, really afforded me a lot of great opportunities, especially in independent living.
yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. I've met a few of the folks over there, and they've been really great. We've had them as guests on the podcast. What do you say, since you've been around so much, are there any things that are kind of unique about Georgia in terms of advocacy and direct services, consumer driven work that might be different than other places you've worked?
I have to say Georgia's advocacy days up in the Capitol, getting the communities involved. I would say that the connectedness that the Self Advocacy Network has is incredible in comparison to the different networks I've been exposed to. And so I love the family type feeling that again the Self Advocacy Networks give, and that it includes, the centers and silks and such.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something to be grateful for, and it's just a reminder to people that are listening that they can participate in those. And so we always send out that information ahead of time so
Yeah,
that
and
they
there's
can.
there's just so many there's so many organizations and agencies that make Georgia so great. And you know, you can name one person from one entity, and I think, another person would know, it's so, like I said, connected and so tight knit. And I love that. So I hope to see that across the nation a little bit more.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, and why do you think that is in Georgia? Like, what kind of laid the groundwork or created that environment? Do you have any sense of that?
Uh, I mean, of course, it has to do, with the leadership. I think that Shelley, when she was in leadership, she, really had her own way of getting folks um included, involved. And I also think that, Georgia, um, while we do have, of course, there's always paperwork and all of that stuff to deal with. Georgia, again, presents it in a different way where it doesn't seem, I think, so overwhelming, where it's not just about the numbers, where it truly is about community organizing.
Yeah, 100%. That makes the I mean, focusing on that seems to me to be a little bit more focused on the stories, which is more easy to grab a hold of and want to get involved in rather than statistics,
Yep.
which are also useful, of course. But yeah, That's great. So you've already kind of touched on, um, you know, SILC GA. We've talked about that a little bit, but what was your title when you were at SILC, and what was your kind of area of focus in terms of projects that you worked on?
Sure. So two awesome like big projects that stick out to me are the inclusion documentary that we did, which is awesome. I believe it's still up online. And then navigating the Capitol that was a couple of videos that we created for folks to kind of understand where the accessibility is in the Capitol. And or how to go in prepared, and those I think are on on their YouTube page. And those were a lot of fun. Then expand did the advocacy work to expanding the centers for independent living was always a legislative item that we had touched on, and that was something that I enjoyed watching, watching the inner workings of that. Um Sorry, the title that I held, I think the last one there was employment specialist, where I was a I held a seat at the table for the Employment First Council out of the VR office. And I'm not sure what that committee is up to right now, but we ensured that folks with disabilities were being given the first choice of competitive and gainful employment versus that 14C um, item that kind of is demeaning to our community.
Can you say a little more about that?
My understanding is that it allows entities to pay individuals with disabilities a significantly smaller amount in unlivable wage um, as an incentive to hire us. And it's like, that doesn't, I want to go for a job and be able to pay my bills and just like the rest of us. And so I believe that, that
Yeah.
14C impedes on us doing that.
What would you say, like, in particular, changed in your perspective as you worked on these projects and kind of evolved in that advocacy role and providing information? Like, how did your perspective on advocacy and disability rights change in that period at SILC?
Um, Well, it certainly helped me see that the boring data stuff is incredibly important, especially in reporting at the end, and or seeking grants and such. Um, because as I mentioned, I like doing more of the consumer driven work, more hands on stuff. But those numbers are what made those one pagers for legislators to understand what it is that we're doing and why. So that is a big thing that it helped me with. Um, Also just opening my mind to the way that committees and or meetings can go on. I guess just that experience helped me learn how to navigate it as most of the time the youngest person at the table. Yeah, just speaking, as like back to the youth part of it, as we encourage young people, like you mentioned, I'm doing it myself. I'm putting myself in that position, and then as a peer mentor, kind of sharing my ups and downs.
What would you say to young people that might be listening to this who want to start um, activism or helping others or advocacy work? Like, what would you say to them having gone through that process yourself?
I would say a couple of things. One, um, try to go in knowing what you want to do or how you want to serve that space. Um, and don't be afraid to ask questions, clarifying questions, because if you don't know what it is you're being asked to do, it'll be hard to, understand why it was wrong, and if that if that makes sense. Um, and also, find a mentor if you can. Whether and that doesn't have to be somebody your exact age, but finding a mentor that has done things like this before and that has and is open to, you know, how to help you, or rather, is someone you're comfortable with, again, asking for that help or saying, I'm stuck here, or how do you think about this? Um, I hope I made sense there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Um, it's that's the emotional risk, right? Of being willing to ask those questions and, kind of in our minds, it always feels like, oh, this is a dumb question or I should know this. But like being able to open yourself up, and that's hardly ever the case. People are always happy to help in terms of the mentorship, it seems like, especially in this kind of field.
Mhm.
Um,
Exactly.
where where I'm sure they've had mentors in the past and that sort of thing.
Right. And mentors, it it may not work exactly immediately with that exact person. You may need to find another one, and so be it. Um it- Unfortunately, it is what it is for that part, right?
If you could point to like a few key moments in your career that really were made a big impact on you, what would they be?
Big moment in my career. Well, I would have to say it is pretty wild. It actually is a time where I was not employed, if that makes sense. Um so I uh, was working and living my life, right? Going out and about, coming home and all that. And I was actually um hit by a vehicle. I did a lot, I did a lot of advocacy and getting folks out of, or ensuring that folks don't go into nursing homes. And then I probably thought I was living my life like, okay, it could never happen to me. And then that moment happened where I was suddenly put at risk. And my community, that moment stuck out to me because my community ensured, did everything that they could to make sure that I was not another number that ended up in a facility. Um, I say that to say, um, in Georgia, it's known that there is a long waiting list for home and community based services. I, at the time, was qualified for the ICWP waiver. Due to the accident, though, is the only reason why I got, and my, community's advocacy. But due to that is the only reason how I got off of that waiting list to get my home and community based services. For those that I've not met, I am physically disabled prior to the accident. I do use a power wheelchair and so on, and so I did have these. I was eligible. But the kicker was that it needed to be a car accident to make it happen instead of my already existing needs. So I say that to say, unfortunately, that that could have been another person's, like, an independent living specialist progress note. I could have been that, and my community, that um, that moment is what stuck out to me and truly showed me how independent living can really take action. Because before that, I knew independent living, of course, as I lived and breathed it and worked it, doing the paperwork and meeting the people. But it's that moment that I recall hearing the doctor, you have this choice of going to this facility or this facility. And then it was my friends that, made that advocacy effort and said, this is what exists outside of the hospital. You should already be aware of this. And he qualifies. Let's get him on this. And that, probably not to be dramatic, but saved my life.
That's a powerful story. And I could imagine how that would only fan the flame of the work that you're already doing,
Right.
feeling the impact of that personally.
Right. And
So, wow, thank you for sharing that.
definitely. And I couldn't have done that done any of that again without, my community support and the SILC at the time I was employed there. And so with their flexibility and leadership, I was, still able to be part of my community in the
Are there particular mentors that stand out as formative for you?
uh wow. I mean, I would say right now, someone that sticks out in my mind right now would be Ken Mitchell. You guys may have you definitely have had to have met him at some point. But I do have to say he yeah, from the beginning of my since I moved to Georgia, um, and to this day, he's provided me some really great mentorship and actually what is the word ordained our wedding my wedding. So that's a real mentor right there, I guess. I don't think I've ever actually acknowledged to Ken that he's my mentor. So surprise, Ken. Now you know. I don't usually like just say. I just it just happens. It's
If you could change, one disability rights issue right now in the world, what would it be?
oh gosh. I'm gonna have to say the personal care attendant crisis because if we can't even start our day, uh, we can't even think about anything else from that point. And um, even if we had, full, affordable, and accessible transportation, if we can't get out of our beds, or safely to the restroom and so on, or bathed or fed, we are not able to even utilize those other systems. So I think that the start needs to be with improving the personal care attendant crises.
Yeah, that's a pretty foundational as you just laid it out right there. It's kind of can't start your day if you don't have that support for a lot of folks. We're almost out of time here, but is there anything you would like to say about the current moment that we find ourselves in terms of politically and the things that are at risk or have already been lost that you would like to comment on?
I think I would say is, finding your community. Whatever I know what we're seeing can be incredibly scary. I myself identify at, intersections. I'm disabled. I also identify as transgender. I'm adopted. And so you need to find community and I know we hear it all the time, self-care, self-care, but I'm serious. You take some time away from it and it sounds like a privilege. Oh, I could just turn it off. It's not turning it off. It's kind of rejuvenating yourself to be able to continue the fight. Um, it's never going to be rainbows and butterflies, right? I would love for a perfect world to exist like that, but um, we got quite a ways to go. So as we move forward, the best way to do it is together. Power in numbers. So, it's finding our community that we can not only fight with, to move forward, but so that we could also self-care with, feed our own hobbies or interests. Um, and then yeah, mentorship, whether you have that actual label of mentorship or you don't, like myself. Um, finding the folks that you can kind of lean on and also offer yourself if you can, because there are going to be people that will need a shoulder or a soundboard just to just whatever it was. Cool.
Absolutely.
And also, finally, last thing, just try not to gatekeep. I know that what I'm saying sounds very gatekeepy, but try not to, if that makes sense. People are taking we're all receiving the same information, but we all are going to be impacted very differently. There's no way of being able to point out how someone's going to be impacted directly, exactly. And so just keeping in mind that it's not always it someone is experiencing something, and let's start our life or start things with kindness if possible.
I gotcha. Yeah. Could you say a little bit more about the gatekeeper piece? Like how do you mean that?
I just I've heard people go, "Oh, it's not that bad. Such and such isn't really going to happen." Oh, and what we really need is, how can I support you? What does this mean to you? What do you think this says? And would you like to talk more about it, kind of thing? Instead of just making someone feel badly for, reacting the way they did. We don't know why they did that. If that works.
That's great wisdom to end on. Parker, thank you so much for your time. It's been great getting to know you, and I know your story will help others. So I appreciate you sharing it.
Sweet, man. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you again, and I'm excited to hear more podcast episodes.